A wealthy man, tormented by secrets, throws a briefcase into the forest. But when the family raven approaches, what it finds inside is so shocking that it could unravel the dark truth behind his wife's perfect facade. The millionaire, a man whose name was synonymous with power and fortune, but whose face now bore the weight of a newly acquired guilt, hastened his steps out of the forest. Every dry leaf that crunched under his shoes seemed to echo the sound of the briefcase falling, a sound he hoped would be lost forever in the tangled undergrowth. He didn't look back. The feeling of relief was palpable, yet mixed with a pang of unease, a silent voice questioning the morality of his actions. "It's done," he murmured to himself, trying to convince himself it was for the best for everyone, especially for Sophia, his daughter-in-law. As the millionaire's figure disappeared among the trees, a dark, intelligent shadow descended from a high branch. Corvus, the family raven, who had been observing the estate with almost human curiosity for years, had witnessed the scene. Its sharp, black eyes missed not a single detail. The man's haste, the thrown object, the almost desperate escape. Corvus was more than just a bird. It was a silent guardian, a repository of unspoken secrets that hung over the Almeida mansion. With an elegant and silent flight, Corvus landed near the briefcase. It was dark leather with metallic clasps that gleamed faintly under the filtered sunlight. The millionaire, in his haste, hadn't properly latched it, or perhaps the impact of the fall had left it slightly ajar. A tiny gap, but enough for Corvus's curiosity. The raven nudged the gap with its beak, testing. The briefcase yielded a little more. With a concentrated effort, it managed to widen the opening enough to peek inside. What its eyes saw inside made it stop, motionless, an unusual stillness for such an active animal. There were no jewels, no money, no important documents that it might recognize as valuable in the human sense. Instead, there was a disordered pile of objects that seemed at first glance meaningless. There were medicine bottles, several of them, all empty, bottles for the heart, for blood pressure, for anxiety, for pain. Complex names, printed on labels Corvus couldn't read, but whose packaging it recognized from the rare times it had seen Sophia's elderly father, Mr. Silver, taking them. The sight of the empty bottles, piled like rubbish, caused a strange sensation in the raven, a dark premonition. It nudged one with its beak, feeling it hollow, empty. Beneath the bottles, there were papers. Many papers. Corvus pulled one out with its beak, partially unfolding it. They were bank statements, contracts, powers of attorney. Although it couldn't decipher the words, the pattern of numbers and signatures, the formality of the documents, conveyed a gravity. It recognized the name Sophia Almeida, and in smaller letters, Silvio Silva. The documents seemed to detail fund transfers, changes of ownership, financial decisions that even to an animal observer appeared disproportionate and unilateral. There was a crumpled letter with shaky handwriting that seemed to plead for something, but which ended abruptly. Corvus felt a chill, a sensation that went beyond survival instinct. It was the perception of injustice, of exploited vulnerability. It had seen Sophia interact with her father, always with a forced smile and sweet words, but her eyes, Corvus had noticed, were cold. It had witnessed Mr. Silver's fragility, the way he recoiled under his daughter's gaze, the way his hands trembled as he signed papers Sophia presented to him. The raven looked at the empty bottles again, then at the financial documents that exposed the web of manipulation. The truth was brutal and clear, even to it. Sophia wasn't caring for her father, she was draining him, just as those empty medicine bottles symbolized the absence of care and deprivation. With a determination that would surprise any human, Corvus picked up one of the most revealing documents, a bank statement with alarming figures and Mr. Silver's signature, and carefully folded it. It wasn't an impulsive decision. It was the logical conclusion of years of silent observation. It knew the millionaire, the man who had just thrown the briefcase, needed to see this. The truth, however dark, could not remain buried in the forest. With the document firmly clutched in its beak, Corvus took flight, its destination, the mansion, and the truth waiting to be revealed. Clutched in its beak, Corvus took flight. Every beat of its wings was an impulse not just upwards, but towards the truth. It soared over the Almeida estate, the imposing mansion that from above resembled a castle of secrets. The mirrored windows reflected the afternoon sun, and Corvus could imagine the millionaire inside, perhaps trying to erase from memory the act he had just committed. The raven felt no anger or judgment, only an urgency, an unwavering certainty that what it carried was crucial. The weight of the paper in its beak was light, but the weight of what it represented was immense. Meanwhile, in the mansion, the millionaire tried to find peace. He was in his office, a spacious room with oak bookshelves and a panoramic view of the well-kept gardens. An untouched glass of whiskey sat on his desk, and he ran a hand through his graying hair, his eyes fixed on a distant point. The feeling of relief he expected to feel upon getting rid of the briefcase wasn't pure. It was mixed with a persistent unease. It was the right thing to do, he repeated to himself like a mantra, but the voice of doubt was stubborn. Sophia, his daughter-in-law, entered the office without knocking, a sweet, worried smile adorning her lips. She was a woman of classic beauty, with eyes that could be warm or cold, depending on the occasion. "Father, is everything all right? You seem troubled," she said, her voice soft, almost a whisper. She approached, placing a light hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry about anything. Whatever happened in the forest, it's resolved. You did what was necessary." The millionaire looked at her, seeking solace, but something in his gaze seemed distant. I don't know, Sophia. It's a heavy decision." "Heavy, yes, but necessary," she insisted, squeezing his shoulder. "For everyone's peace, for your peace especially, Mr. Silver. He was becoming a burden, wasn't he, with all those quirks, the medicines, the papers. Now he's safe. And so are you." The word burden echoed in the millionaire's mind, and he felt a slight shiver. He had convinced himself he was protecting Sophia, protecting himself from a scandal. But the truth was that her manipulation had planted this seed of burden in his mind. At that exact moment, a dark shape passed by the open office window. Corvus, with surprising agility, landed on the window frame, its black eyes fixed on the millionaire. It made no sound, just watched, the document still in its beak. The millionaire, distracted, took a moment to notice. Sophia, however, saw the raven and frowned. That annoying bird again, always around, as if it's spying on us. Corvus ignored Sophia. With a deliberate movement, it flew from the windowsill to the oak desk, right in front of the millionaire. With a slight shake of its head, it dropped the bank statement. The folded paper fell softly onto the polished surface of the desk, sliding close to the whiskey glass. The millionaire blinked, surprised by the raven's audacity. "Corvus, what are you doing here?" He reached out to shoo the bird away, but his eyes fell upon the paper. Curious, he picked it up. As he unfolded the statement, the millionaire's expression shifted from confusion to growing perplexity. His eyes scanned the numbers, the dates, the transfers. He recognized the name Silvio Silva, Sophia's father, and just below it, the shaky signature he knew belonged to the elderly man. But what shocked him were the amounts, massive transfers, almost all of Mr. Silva's fortune to accounts in Sophia Almeida's name. These were sums he hadn't imagined. "What is this?" he murmured, his voice choked. Sophia, who had been watching with a pang of irritation and curiosity, approached. "What is it, father? Some old paper the raven brought? That creature is a scavenger." But the millionaire didn't hear her. He continued to read, and with each line, each number, The web of lies Sophia had woven began to unravel before his eyes. The dates of the transfers, their frequency, almost the entirety of Mr. Silver's assets. It wasn't a burden he was helping to conceal. It was theft, a cruel exploitation. He looked at Corvus, which was still on the desk, observing him with an almost human intensity. The raven seemed to say, "There's more." The millionaire felt a chill run down his spine. The briefcase, the empty medicine bottles, the neglect, everything connected in a terrifying flash. He had been blinded by trust, by manipulation. His gaze shifted from the paper to Sophia, who was now pale, her eyes fixed on the statement in his hands. The sweet smile had vanished, replaced by a mask of panic. "Sophia." The millionaire's voice was a hoarse whisper, laden with contained fury and deep pain. What? What does this mean?" Sophia tried to regain her composure, but her voice failed her. "Father, this is a mistake. They're just old documents. Mr. Silver is confused. He signs anything. I was just managing his finances to protect him." But the lie was transparent. The millionaire saw the truth in her eyes, in the trembling of her hands, in the way she recoiled. His daughter-in-law's perfect facade had crumbled, revealing the cruelty behind it. He had thrown the proof of truth into the forest, but the truth, cunning as a raven, had found its way back home. The millionaire took a step back, the crumpled bank statement in his hands. The mask of panic on Sophia's face was the cruelest confirmation. There was no mistake, no misunderstanding. There was only the naked, brutal truth brought by a raven. Managing his finances? The millionaire's voice was a hoarse whisper, almost unrecognizable. "You call this management? You robbed him. And what does protect mean when he was being stripped of everything he owned?" Sophia tried to compose herself, but the trembling in her hands was uncontrollable. "Father, please, you don't understand. Mr. Silver was sick, very sick. He was delirious, spending without control. I was just trying to protect the family's patrimony, what was left for him, for us." "Lies!" the millionaire roared, his fury finally exploding. He crumpled the bank statement in his hand, his knuckles white. "Protect? You left him with nothing. And the medicines, Sophia? The empty bottles I saw in the briefcase? Was that protection too? You were letting him die of neglect while you robbed him." The mention of the empty bottles made Sophia turn even paler. Her eyes widened, genuine terror replacing calculated fury. She hadn't known the millionaire had seen the briefcase's contents. The information caught her off guard, breaking her last line of defense. Corvus, observing the scene with an almost supernatural stillness, let out a low croak like a somber commentary. It was still on the desk, its black eyes fixed on the millionaire, then on Sophia, as if assessing each one's reaction. The millionaire ignored the raven for a moment, his gaze fixed on his daughter-in-law, who now seemed to shrink under his intensity. "I was blinded by your manipulation, by your false sweetness. You made me believe he was a burden, that I was doing the right thing by getting rid of that briefcase. You used me, Sophia." The pain of betrayal was palpable in his voice, mixed with a cold, cutting anger. "No, Father, no!" Sophia pleaded, stepping forward, her hands outstretched in a desperate gesture. "I swear I only wanted what was best for everyone. Mr. Silver was a difficult man. He didn't want help. I was desperate to rob your own father," the millionaire retorted, incredulous, his voice filled with disgust. "Desperate to leave him without his medicines, without his dignity. Where is Mr. Silver now, Sophia? What have you done with him?" The question hung in the air, laden with a veiled threat. Sophia recoiled again, her eyes darting to the floor. The truth about Mr. Silver's whereabouts and condition was the last piece of the puzzle, and she knew she could no longer hide it. Her silence was a confession. The millionaire felt a shiver of horror. The image of the empty bottles, the financial documents, the shaky handwriting on the crumpled letter he had glimpsed. Everything fit into a narrative of calculated cruelty. He had been an accomplice, even if unconsciously, to something terrible. Guilt struck him like lightning, stronger than anger. His gaze returned to Corvus, which was still on the desk. The raven tilted its head, as if understanding the depth of the revelation. The millionaire realized that the bird hadn't just brought a paper. It had brought the truth, the tip of an iceberg of lies. The briefcase, the millionaire murmured, more to himself than to Sophia. I need that briefcase. He remembered the haste with which he threw it, the way it fell, perhaps opening even further. There was more inside, much more. Sophia, seeing the determination in her father-in-law's eyes and the mention of the briefcase, knew her game was over. Panic turned into despair. No, father, don't go. There's nothing there. They're just old papers, unimportant things. Her voice was a lament, words tumbling over each other. He was already turning, his mind racing. The forest was no longer a place to hide secrets, but rather the location where the truth awaited rescue. He had to go. He had to see everything. He had to understand the extent of the evil he had allowed, of which he had been an accomplice. Corvus, as if reading his thoughts, let out a louder croak and took flight from the desk, circling once over the millionaire's head before flying out the open window towards the forest. It was an invitation, a silent guide. The millionaire looked at the door, then at the window, and without a word followed the raven. The truth, once unearthed, could not be ignored, and he, the blind millionaire, was finally beginning to see. The millionaire stormed out of the office like a hurricane, the door slamming with a crash that echoed through the silent house. Sophia, paralyzed by shock and despair, watched him leave, her words of plea dying in her throat. She knew there was no stopping the avalanche she herself had triggered. Her father-in-law's face, once blind with trust, was now etched with icy fury and a pain she never thought she'd see. He hurried down the stairs, ignoring the luxury around him. Each step was driven by an overwhelming mix of anger, guilt, and an urgent need to confront the truth. The image of the empty bottles and the numbers on the bank statement danced in his mind, and relentless accusation. He had been a fool, a puppet in his daughter-in-law's hands, and the shame of this realization was almost unbearable. As he left the mansion, the cool night air hit him, but it didn't cool the heat of his fury. Corvus was already ahead, a dark speck against the twilight sky, flying towards the edge of the forest. The millionaire didn't hesitate. He followed the raven, his steps firm and determined, as if an invisible force pulled him. The forest, once a refuge of peace, now seemed a labyrinth of dark secrets. With each step among the trees, the millionaire felt the weight of his own blindness. Dry leaves crunched under his expensive shoes, a sound that seemed to amplify the accelerated beat of his heart. Corvus flew low, landing on branches and waiting, then taking flight again, always a little ahead. It was a silent guide, a herald of the truth he had tried to bury. The darkness of the forest deepened, and the shadows of the trees seemed to stretch and contort, taking on menacing shapes. The millionaire didn't care about the scratches on his clothes or the dampness of the soil. His focus was singular, to find that briefcase. He needed to see, to touch, to understand the extent of Sophia's cruelty. Finally, Corvus landed on a low branch, croaking softly and pointing with its head towards a tangle of bushes and twisted roots. Not far from where the millionaire remembered throwing the briefcase, the millionaire approached, his heart in his throat. He pushed aside the dry branches with his hands, and there it was. The leather briefcase, dark and worn, lay semi-open, caught between the roots of an ancient tree. The impact of the fall had forced it open, and part of its contents were exposed, as if the forest itself was revealing the secrets. The millionaire knelt, his breath caught in his throat. His eyes scanned the briefcase's interior. There were more empty medicine bottles, some with labels for important chronic disease medications scattered alongside other documents. One of them was a small, leather-bound notebook he recognized as Mr. Silver's. Beside it, a will, with the elderly man's shaky signature, but with clauses he knew Mr. Silver would never have agreed to. And, to his horror, a series of handwritten letters in Sophia's father's hesitant script. He picked up one of the letters, his hands trembling. The moonlight, filtered through the tree canopy, barely illuminated the words, but he managed to read. They were pleas. Pleas for help, for food, for his medicines. There were mentions of Sophia and loneliness, of hunger and pain. In one of the letters, a phrase stood out, written with palpable anguish. "She took everything from me, even hope." The millionaire felt a knot in his throat. The pain, the guilt, the anger, all merged into an overwhelming wave. He had thrown away not just a briefcase, but the voice of a desperate man, the cry for help of a victim. He had been an accomplice to a heinous crime, disguised as protection and care. He looked at Corvus, which was still on the branch, observing him with its deep black eyes. There was no judgment in the raven's gaze, only an ancient wisdom, as if the bird had always known the truth. The millionaire closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the revelation. The briefcase wasn't just proof, it was the materialization of unimaginable cruelty. Upon reopening his eyes, the pain on his face had transformed into a cold, relentless determination. There was no more room for doubt or hesitation. Sophia had crossed a line, and he, the millionaire who had been blind, now saw with brutal clarity. He picked up the briefcase, holding it firmly. The truth, finally, was in his hands, and he would make Sophia pay for every tear, every plea, every act of cruelty she had inflicted upon her own father. The millionaire emerged from the forest, no longer the confused and tormented man of minutes ago, but a figure of icy determination. The leather briefcase, now a heavy burden of brutal truths, was firmly clutched in his hand. Corvus flew silently beside him, a winged guardian of justice about to be served. The mansion, once a symbol of his fortune and tranquility, now seemed a stage for the farce his recent life had been. Each step towards the main door was a deliberate act, a reaffirmation of his newfound clarity. The anger still burned, but it was a controlled flame, channeled towards a singular purpose. He no longer sought answers. He had them all, piled up and screaming inside that briefcase. Upon entering the house, the silence was oppressive. Sophia, he presumed, would be waiting, perhaps in the office where the first part of the confrontation had taken place. And he was right. She was there, standing near the window, her back turned to the door, her shoulders slumped in a posture of defeat. She didn't need to turn to know he had returned. The weight of his presence, the charged energy of his silent fury, filled the room. When she finally turned, her eyes widened at the sight of the briefcase in his hands. Color drained from her face, leaving it pale and stained by the tears she had likely shed in his absence. The mask of innocence and despair she had tried to maintain completely fell away, revealing naked terror in her eyes. "Father," she began, her voice a hoarse, almost inaudible whisper. The millionaire didn't respond with words. Instead, he walked to the mahogany desk, opened the briefcase and dumped its contents with a brusque, final gesture. The empty medicine bottles rolled, clattering against each other with a hollow sound. The financial documents scattered, exposing numbers and transactions. And the letters, Mr. Silver's trembling pleas, fell like dry leaves, each one a cry of pain. He picked up one of the letters, the one that read, "She took everything from me, even hope." His eyes, once blind, now burned with a cold, relentless intensity. "You told me he was a burden," the millionaire said, his voice low but sharp as a blade. You made me believe I was doing the right thing by getting rid of this. But what were you really doing, Sophia? You were taking his hope. You were taking his life. Sophia stumbled back a step, tripping over her own feet. No, Father, I can explain. He was difficult. He didn't want the medicines. Stop, he roared, the word echoing in the office. He pointed to the empty bottles. He didn't want the medicines, or did you hide them? You left him without food, without dignity, while diverting what was his for your own greed. He picked up the manipulated will. And this? You made him sign this, didn't you? A will that left him with nothing, while you profited from his misery. The words hit her like blows. She tried to defend herself, but the words wouldn't come, caught in her throat. Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't tears of remorse, but of despair and fear of being caught. I was a fool, the millionaire continued, his voice filled with self-loathing. A fool blinded by your manipulation, but no more. I saw, I read, I understood the extent of your cruelty. He looked at her, his eyes devoid of any pity. Where is Mr. Silva, Sophia? Where have you hidden him? Because I assure you he will be found. And you, Sophia, will pay for every act of abuse, for every stolen coin, for every drop of suffering you inflicted upon your own father. Corvus, who had flown in through the open window and landed on the windowsill, let out a loud, piercing croak, like a final verdict. Its black eyes were fixed on Sophia, a silent yet powerful observer of the truth that had finally come to light. The millionaire picked up the phone, his fingers firm and decisive. I won't wait. The police will be called, and my lawyers. You won't escape this, Sophia. Justice, finally, will be served. Sophia fell to her knees, the sound of her hysterical crying filling the office. He was already dialing, the briefcase and its irrefutable evidence beside him. The game was over, and for Sophia, the night was just beginning. The millionaire, with the phone pressed against his ear, spoke with chilling calm, each word a dry, precise blow. Yes, I need to report a serious case of neglect, financial abuse, and possibly kidnapping of an elderly man. His name is Mr. Silva. My daughter-in-law, Sophia, is the main suspect. I have irrefutable proof here with me. He gestured to the open briefcase on the desk, the documents and bottles scattered like evidence of a heinous crime. Sophia, still on her knees, lifted her head, her eyes red and swollen, but now with a glint of genuine panic. No, Father, please don't do this. I can fix it. We can talk. I can return the money. I can. Her voice dissolved into a lament, but the millionaire didn't even look at her. Yes, I'm at my residence. The address is, he continued, providing the details with a clarity that contrasted with the emotional chaos in the room. Please send a team as quickly as possible, and also I need lawyers specializing in criminal and family law. This is urgent. Upon hanging up, he placed the phone back on the receiver with a final click, the sound echoing in the tense silence. His eyes, previously fixed on emptiness, now turned to Sophia, and what she saw in them made her shrink. There was no longer uncontrolled fury, but a calculating coldness, an unwavering resolve that was far more terrifying. You had your chance, Sophia, he said, his voice low, but laden with an authority she had never heard before. Many chances. I trusted you. I gave you everything, and you repaid me with lies, with manipulation, with the misery of an innocent man. He pointed to the letters. You let him die of hunger, of thirst without his medicines, while you lived in luxury with his money. Do you think returning the money will erase that? Sophia tried to crawl to him, tears streaming down her face. I was desperate, Father. I made a mistake. I swear I'll never do it again. Please, don't turn me over to the police. Think of my marriage. Think of your son. He doesn't deserve this. The millionaire laughed, a humorless, bitter sound. My son, do you think he would approve of what you did? Do you think he would be proud of a woman who abuses her own father and manipulates his family? No, Sophia, my son, if he knew, would be ashamed. And my son is far away, too busy to see the snake he has in his home. He paused, his expression hardening. And the marriage, you destroyed the marriage the moment you decided that greed was more important than human decency. Corvus, observing everything from the windowsill, let out a long, hoarse croak, as if agreeing with every word. It spread its wings, flew to the desk, and landed delicately beside the empty bottles, its black eyes fixed on Sophia, a silent and relentless judge. "You won't escape this," the millionaire repeated, his voice now like ice. "You will face the consequences of each of your actions, and I will make sure that justice is served, not only for Mr. Silver, but for me, for having been so blind. I will no longer be your accomplice." Sophia cowered, her hysterical crying returning in full force. She knew it was the end. The mask had fallen, the manipulation no longer worked. The man before her was not the blind, manipulable father-in-law she knew, but a relentless judge, determined to make her pay. The distant sound of a siren began to fill the night silence, growing in intensity. Sophia lifted her head, the sound hitting her like a hammer. The terror in her eyes was palpable. Justice was on its way. And for Sophia, the night of her downfall was just beginning. The millionaire, in turn, felt a weight lifted from his shoulders, replaced by an iron determination. The truth finally had been revealed, and he was ready to face the consequences, no matter how painful they might be. The distant siren, once an almost inaudible whisper, now tore through the night's silence with increasing urgency. Sophia, still cowering on the floor, lifted her head, the sound hitting her like a hammer, the reality of her situation solidifying with every decibel. The terror in her eyes was palpable, a mix of panic and resignation. Blue and red flashing lights began to dance across the office windows, painting the walls with intermittent flashes. The sound of tires on the driveway gravel and police car doors slamming echoed through the mansion, once a refuge and now resembling a crime scene. Two uniformed police officers, followed by a serious-faced detective, entered the office. Their eyes swept the room, settling first on the millionaire's imposing figure, then on the weeping woman on the floor, and finally on the open briefcase and its contents scattered across the mahogany desk. "Mr. Almeida?" the detective asked, his voice calm and professional, yet with an unquestionable tone of authority. "We received a call about a serious case of neglect, financial abuse, and possible kidnapping." The millionaire nodded, indicating the briefcase with a firm gesture. "That's me, and these are the proofs. My daughter-in-law Sophia is responsible. She abused her own father, Mr. Silver, and held him captive while diverting his funds and depriving him of basic care." Sophia let out a muffled cry, trying to stand, but her legs gave way and she fell back to the floor. "No, it's a lie. He's making it up. I didn't do anything. He always hated me." The detective, without taking his eyes off the millionaire, gestured to one of the officers who approached Sophia cautiously. "Madam, please remain calm. We need you to come with us to give a statement." "No, I'm not going anywhere," she screamed, her voice hysterical and choked with tears. "I'm innocent. He's framing me. He always wanted to harm me." The millionaire stared at her with a coldness that made her tremble, an expression she had never seen on him. "I didn't hate you, Sophia. I loved you like a daughter. I trusted you. But you deceived me. You abused my trust and the vulnerability of an elderly man. The proofs are here. Mr. Silver's letters, the bank statements showing transfers to your accounts, the empty medicine bottles he should have taken and didn't." He pointed to the scattered documents, "and the manipulated will, which left you with everything while he wasted away." The detective picked up one of the letters, reading it quickly, his expression hardening with each line. He looked at Sophia with new gravity, his eyes fixed on her. "Madam, we need to know where Mr. Silva is. His safety is our top priority." Sophia shook her head frantically, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know. He left. I haven't seen him. He's a difficult man, always has been." "Don't lie, Sophia," the millionaire interjected, his voice sharp as a blade. "You kept him somewhere. Tell them now." Corvus, who had remained silent on the windowsill, let out a loud, piercing croak, flying to the millionaire's shoulder as if to reinforce the truth of his words. Its black eyes, fixed on Sophia, seemed to judge each of her lies, a winged and relentless judge. One of the police officers, with a firmer tone, said, "Madam, if you don't cooperate, it will only worsen your situation. Where is Mr. Silva?" Pressed from all sides, with the truth exposed and nowhere left to run, Sophia finally broke down. The words came out between sobs and tears, her voice almost inaudible. He's in the cottage, at the back of the estate. I just wanted him to be safe, not to interfere with my business." The detective exchanged a meaningful look with the other officer. "Check the cottage immediately and call an ambulance for medical evaluation." As one of the officers hurried out, the detective turned to Sophia. "Madam, you are under arrest on suspicion of neglect, financial abuse, and elder kidnapping. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court." He began to read her rights, the words echoing in the tense silence. Sophia, now completely defeated, didn't resist as the officer helped her to her feet and handcuffed her. Her eyes met the millionaire's one last time, filled with a mixture of hatred, despair, and deep dread, but he showed no emotion, only a cold, unwavering resolve. She was escorted out of the office, her sobs diminishing as she was led away. The sound of the police car siren, which would take her away, began to fade into the night, carrying with it the farce and cruelty that had dominated the mansion. The millionaire stood there, amidst the chaos of the office, the scattered documents, the empty bottles. Corvus was still on his shoulder, a comforting weight. The silence that followed Sophia's departure was heavy, but different. It wasn't the oppressive silence of manipulation, but the silence of justice beginning to be served. He looked at the briefcase, at the proofs. The truth was brutal, yet liberating. The pain of betrayal was still there, but the blindness had vanished. Now it was time to find Mr. Silva and begin to rebuild what Sophia had destroyed. The road would be long, but he was no longer alone. Corvus, his faithful guardian, was there, and justice, finally, had found its way. The millionaire remained motionless in the office, the echo of Sophia's sirens fading into the night's darkness. The silence that settled was almost deafening, punctuated only by the rustle of Corvus's wings as it settled on his shoulder. The briefcase, its secrets exposed, lay open on the desk, a mute testimony to cruelty and blindness. He ran a hand over his face, feeling the weight of years of deception. The anger at Sophia's betrayal was intense, but it was the guilt for not having seen, for having allowed Mr. Silva to suffer under his own roof, that gnawed at him from within. "Father," he murmured, his voice hoarse, as if the word itself were a heavy burden. He had never called him that, not truly. Mr. Silva was Sophia's father, a man he had welcomed, but to whom, deep down, he had never given proper attention. The truth was, he had been as blind as Corvus itself before the raven opened his eyes. Corvus croaked softly, rubbing its head against his cheek, a gesture of solace the millionaire felt deeply. He looked at the raven, his eyes moist. "You knew, didn't you? You tried to warn me." The raven merely stared at him with its intelligent, black eyes as if saying, "Now you know." Time dragged on. Each minute felt like an hour, each second an eternity. The anxiety of knowing Mr. Silver's condition was excruciating. He imagined the worst, the images of the letters and empty bottles repeating in his mind. What had Sophia done? How far had she gone in her neglect? Suddenly, the detective's radio, which had remained in the office, crackled. The detective quickly picked it up, bringing it to his ear. The millionaire watched, his heart pounding in his chest. The detective's demeanor, previously serious, softened slightly, but visible concern remained. "Understood," the detective said into the radio. He hung up and turned to the millionaire. "Mr. Almeida, we found Mr. Silva in the cottage. He is weak and disoriented, but conscious. Paramedics are with him now, conducting an initial assessment. It appears he is dehydrated and malnourished, and there are signs he hasn't received proper medication for a considerable time." A sigh of relief escaped the millionaire's lips, mixed with a sharp pang of pain. Alive, he was alive, but the detective's words painted a grim picture of neglect. Is he very bad?" the millionaire asked, his voice trembling. "He needs urgent medical care, but there's no immediate life-threatening risk now that he's under our care and receiving treatment," the detective reassured, but his voice still carried a note of seriousness. "However, recovery will be long and will require much patience and dedication. He'll need physical therapy, nutritional and psychological support. The prolonged abuse and neglect have left deep marks, not just physical, but emotional as well." "I understand," Almeida said, his voice choked. "I will ensure he has everything he needs. The best care, the best specialists, whatever it takes." Dr. Ramos looked at him with a hint of curiosity and compassion. "It's a sad situation, Mr. Almeida, but it's good that you're here now." "I should have been here sooner," Almeida confessed, shame burning on his face. "I failed him." "The important thing is that you're here now," the doctor repeated. "He'll be admitted to the ICU for intensive monitoring over the next 24 to 48 hours. After that, we'll transfer him to a private room where he can begin his recovery." Almeida nodded, absorbing every word. Guilt was a heavy burden, but the determination to redeem his mistakes was even stronger. He wouldn't leave Mr. Silva alone again. He would be the family Mr. Silva deserved, the family Sophia had denied him. He asked to see Mr. Silva, even for a brief moment. In the ICU, Mr. Silva was connected to various machines, his face still pale. But there was a serenity in his induced sleep. Almeida held his hand again, feeling the faint warmth that was beginning to return. "I'm here, Mr. Silva," he promised, his voice firm, though choked. "I'm here." Outside, the night continued, but for Almeida, a new dawn had begun. The darkness of ignorance had been dispelled, and the long journey of healing and redemption was just beginning. He knew that Corvus, somewhere, was watching, a silent guardian of the truth and justice that had finally prevailed. Almeida left the ICU, the weight of the world on his shoulders, but with a clarity he hadn't felt in a long time. The image of Mr. Silva, frail and defenseless, connected to wires and monitors, etched itself into his mind. The promise he had made, "I'm here," wasn't just for the elderly man. It was for himself, an oath that he would never again allow blindness or manipulation to sway him from what was right. He found a more secluded corner in the waiting room, away from the occasional bustle of the emergency department. He took out his cell phone, his hands still trembling slightly. The first call would be to his lawyer, Dr. Mendez. It was time to dismantle the web of lies and cruelty that Sophia had woven. "Dr. Mendez, it's Almeida," he said, his voice firm despite the emotion. "I need you to come to the city hospital immediately. It's about Mr. Silva and Sophia." There was a pause on the other end. "Mr. Almeida, has something serious happened? I heard rumors about the police at your estate." "The worst has happened, Dr. Mendez. Sophia has been arrested. We found Mr. Silva in a very critical state of neglect and abuse. I have irrefutable proof that she was drugging him, robbing him and letting him die. I need you to initiate legal proceedings against her for all possible charges: neglect, elder abuse, financial fraud, attempted murder, whatever is applicable. Experienced and usually unflappable, Dr. Mendez seemed shocked. Attempted murder, Mr. Almeida, that's a very serious accusation. I know, but the empty medicine bottles, the letters, the state we found him in, there's no other conclusion. She wanted to get rid of him, to have full control over his fortune, which in turn would end up in my hands or my son's. She used me, Dr. Mendez. She blinded me. The shame was palpable in his voice. I want her to pay for every second of suffering she inflicted upon Mr. Silva. Understood, Mr. Almeida. I'll be there in an hour. Meanwhile, we need to think about Mr. Silva's safety and future. He'll need intensive care and perhaps a temporary legal guardian, given the situation. I will be the legal guardian, Almeida declared without hesitation. I will take care of everything. The best doctors, nurses, therapists. He will have everything he needs to recover. And when he leaves here, he will come to my house. I will not leave him alone again. He hung up the phone, feeling a mix of relief and a new wave of cold anger. Justice for Sofia would be relentless. But the priority now was Mr. Silva. He tried to call his son, Marcos, Sofia's husband. The phone rang several times before going to voicemail. Almeida left a short, direct message without mincing words. Marcos, your father is in the hospital, in serious condition. Your wife is under arrest. I need you to come here immediately. We have a lot to talk about. The call with Marcos would be the most difficult, perhaps even more so than the confrontation with Sofia. How would he explain to his son that the woman he loved was a monster? How would he explain his own blindness? The truth was that Marcos had also been negligent, absent. The Almeida family was in ruins, and he, the patriarch, was the only one who could try to rebuild something from the ashes. Almeida looked out the hospital window, the night's darkness beginning to give way to the first grey tones of dawn. Somewhere out there, he knew, Corvus was watching. The raven had been his guide, his messenger of truth. It had brought light into his darkness, even if the light revealed a painful and shameful reality. Mr. Silva's journey to recovery would be long, and Almeida's journey of redemption would be even more arduous. But he was ready. He had been blind, but now he saw. And with this vision came renewed strength, an unwavering determination to protect those he loved and to right the wrongs of the past. Justice was on its way, and with it, the hope of a new beginning, not only for Mr. Silva, but for Almeida's own soul. He stood up, ready to face whatever came. The day had arrived, but the light filtering through the hospital windows seemed cold and merciless. Almeida remained seated, exhaustion weighing on him, but his mind sharpened by the urgency of events. It wasn't long before Dr. Mendez, his longtime lawyer, arrived. The man, usually impeccable, looked slightly rumpled, as if he had dressed in haste. His eyes, however, were alert and serious. Mr. Almeida, Doctor, Mendez greeted, his voice low, sitting opposite him. I'm glad to see you despite the circumstances. The situation is serious, from what I understand. Almeida nodded, without mincing words. It's worse than you can imagine, Dr. Mendez. Sofia not only neglected Mr. Silva, she was slowly poisoning him with lack of medication, robbing him and letting him waste away. It's attempted murder, pure and simple. The lawyer frowned, absorbing the gravity of the words. I see. Does the police already have the proofs you mentioned? The bottles, the documents? Yes, the briefcase Corvus found. I handed everything over to them. But I need you to start acting immediately. I want her prosecuted with the full force of the law. I want her to pay for every second of suffering she inflicted upon Mr. Silva. Almeida's voice was cold, devoid of any emotion beyond contained anger. We will do that, Mr. Almeida. We will initiate proceedings for neglect, elder abuse, fraud, and based on medical evidence, attempted murder. It's a strong case, especially with Mr. Silver's testimony when he's able, and the medical reports. Meanwhile, we need to ensure Mr. Silver's legal protection. I suggest we request temporary legal guardianship, and you would be the most suitable person. I will be the legal guardian, Almeida reiterated, his decision unwavering. And when he leaves here, he will come to my house. I will not leave him alone again. He will have the best care, the best specialists, whatever it takes. And Dr. Mendez nodded, impressed by his client's determination. Very well. I'll start preparing the paperwork right away. I need a power of attorney to act on your behalf and on Mr. Silver's behalf. And what about Marcos? The mention of his son brought a pang of pain to Almeida. I left a message. He should be on his way. No sooner had the words left his mouth than Marcos appeared at the entrance of the waiting room. His face was pale and drawn, his eyes red and swollen, as if he had cried or spent the night awake. He looked like a ghost of himself, and Almeida's anger mingled with a deep sadness at seeing his son so disoriented. Father? Marcos approached, his voice hoarse, his eyes fixed on Almeida. What's happening? The police were at home. Sophia, what did you do? There was a mix of confusion and accusation in his tone. Almeida stood up, his posture rigid. What I did, Marcos, what you did. Where were you while your father wasted away? Where were you while your wife tortured him? Almeida's voice was low, but laden with a silent fury that made Marcos recoil a step. I don't know what you're talking about. Sophia would never do something like that. She loved him. She took care of him. Marcos tried to argue, denial evident in every word. Took care of him? Almeida laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. She was killing him, Marcos, slowly, drugging him, robbing him, letting him die of hunger and thirst. Your father is in the ICU, Marcos. Malnourished, dehydrated, his heart failing because she wasn't giving him his medicines. Marcos staggered, Almeida's words hitting him like punches. No, it's not true. You're mistaken, Father. Sophia, she wouldn't do that. I have the proofs, Marcos. The briefcase she tried to hide, full of empty medicine bottles, letters she intercepted, financial documents showing how she was diverting your father's money. The raven, Marcos, the raven showed me the truth that I and you were too blind to see. Almeida pointed to Dr. Mendez, who was observing the scene with a grave expression. Your lawyer is here to initiate proceedings against her for attempted murder, among other things. Marcos's face contorted in a mixture of horror and disbelief. The image of Sophia, the woman he loved, crumbled before his eyes. Attempted murder, he whispered, his voice almost inaudible. Yes, and you, Marcos, are an accomplice through your neglect, through your absence, through your blindness. I was blind too, but now I see, and I won't rest until Sophia pays for each of her crimes. And as for you, Almeida paused, the pain in his eyes deeper than the anger. You need to decide whose side you're on, the side of truth and justice, or the side of the woman who almost killed your father. Marcos collapsed into a nearby chair, his hands covering his face, his body trembling. Tears streamed between his fingers. The silence that followed was heavy, filled only by his son's muffled sobs. Almeida felt a tightening in his chest. The family he thought he had built was in ruins, and the reconstruction would be painful and lengthy. But he wouldn't hesitate. The priority was Mr. Silver, his recovery and his safety, and then justice. He looked at Dr. Mendez. Start the proceedings, doctor. There's no time to lose. The lawyer nodded, already taking out his cell phone to make the first calls. Marcos remained hunched, his sobs gradually subsiding into a continuous moan. Denial faded, replaced by a cold, paralyzing understanding. He slowly lifted his head, his red, swollen eyes fixed on his father. I didn't know, Father, I swear. She was so convincing. She said he was just old, that it was his age. Almeida sighed, anger giving way to deep exhaustion. She manipulated us, Marcos. Me, you, your father. She took advantage of our trust, our blindness. But that doesn't absolve us of guilt. We failed him. Dr. Mendez, who had already made a few quick calls, intervened with a softer but firm voice. Marcos, the situation is critical. Your father is in serious condition. We need your cooperation to ensure he receives the best care and that justice is served. Your testimony, your perspective on Sofia's behavior could be crucial. Marcos looked at the lawyer, then at his father. The brutal and undeniable reality finally settled in. What do I need to do? First, accept the truth, Almeida said, his voice softer now, but still laden with seriousness. Then be present. For your father, for me, for justice. He extended his hand to his son, a hesitant but sincere gesture. It won't be easy, but we can no longer run. Marcos hesitated for a moment, then took his father's hand. The grip was weak, but there was a silent promise of support. The pain was still there, but a spark of determination began to shine in his eyes. The Almeida family was broken, but perhaps not irremediably. While Dr. Mendez continued to organize the legal proceedings, Almeida and Marcos remained silent, each lost in their own thoughts. The image of Mr. Silva, frail and defenseless, was a constant reminder of the urgency of their actions. Almeida knew that Marcos's father's recovery would be long and arduous, requiring patience, love, and the best resources. He was ready to offer all of it. Dawn finally broke, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The light streaming through the hospital windows seemed less cold now, perhaps a reflection of the small flame of hope that was beginning to warm Almeida's heart. Justice for Sofia would be relentless, and the reconstruction of the Almeida family would be a painful and lengthy process. But for the first time in a long time, Almeida felt he was on the right path. And with this vision came the strength to face the future, to protect those he loved, and to correct the mistakes of the past. Somewhere, perhaps perched on a nearby tree, Corvus watched. Its work was done. The truth had been revealed, and the seed of justice planted. Almeida's journey from blindness to redemption had reached a new beginning. The raven's silence was a testament to the complexity of life, the darkness of betrayal, and the resilience of hope.